All right, what's up, everybody? Let me take these earbuds off so I can hear myself. So, it's March 27th on Sunday at 12:07 p.m. This is going to be a totally unscripted and unedited video, and I just have to point this out. So, I knew I was going to have an interview, a day of interviews, basically, coming up. And so I brought my professional quality microphone, but I didn't bring basically the part where it clamps to like the table I'm using, and then you can put the boom arm in it. So I ended up basically tying the boom arm to this lamp. So as you can see, I care about being professional, and that was just a total Ryan move there. So anyways, this is not going to be like one of those videos where it's going to be super scripted or anything like that. I will try to give you some useful advice about what I've been, well, maybe not useful, but I'll tell you what I've been doing to prepare for my virtual Onsite interview, the whole process, and how I feel going into it. But the main thing I want to just start with here is I have no idea if I'm going to get the job or not, and the way I'm mentally walking into this is that it's not actually a big deal, because it really isn't. It's really cool to have this opportunity, and I'm really happy that I made it this far. To give you some context here, I've been through a initial phone screen interview with a recruiter, which is pretty easy for me. It was just Android stuff. A technical screen interview, which had two algorithm problems. I'll kind of go through all these different things, but just to summarize it. And then tomorrow is what's known as a virtual on-site interview. So normally what would happen is, had I made it to this stage before COVID, I would have been flown over to Menlo Park in California, whether I got the job or not, to do this kind of all-day interview thing. Instead, because of COVID, it's basically an all-day interview virtually through like Zoom and stuff like that. So probably some of you can work out which company I'll be interviewing with just based on that. I'm going to keep it quiet until after the interview is over, just because I feel like it. So anyways, let me sort of summarize the whole process from start to finish. So in about close to the end of November, I was contacted by a recruiter at a MAANG company, and I guess some people aren't 100% sure what MAANG stands for, so that's Meta, formerly known as Facebook, so you might be still hearing FANG, that's what that is. Apple, Amazon, Netflix, and Google. So it's this annoying buzzword hashtag thing that I'm forced to talk about and include videos, because if you don't do that kind of thing, then you're just not really going to get any kind of viewership on multiple platforms. So don't hate the player, hate the game. Anyways, so it's one of those companies, and so I got my sort of initial phone screen, which was done by a recruiter, and they just asked me 6 true or false questions to do with Android. I'm an Android developer, so I was able to get all 6 of those correct. One of them I was a little unsure on. If you know your Android stuff quite well, then you'll be able to get through that one pretty quickly, but you got to know some stuff like the difference between an implicit and an explicit intent is, and stuff like that. I'm not going to go into too much detail there, but that's one of the questions that was asked. It took them about a month and a quarter, something like that, about 40-ish days to tell me that I had passed that. I think the reason why it took so long is in December and sort of January, it's kind of crunch time for a lot of these companies, especially the ones that are making money on ad revenue, for example. But for whatever reason, it took them like a month and a bit to get back to me. They told me that I had a technical screen, it's called, Android technical screen interview, and I ended up, so they told me sometime around like January 10th, I don't remember exactly, and I asked them it might have been a bit after that actually, and I basically asked them, can you give me like 6 weeks almost, 5 or 6 weeks to prepare for it, because the truth is that I don't have a degree in anything. I have studied software engineering a little bit. If you're wondering what I'm talking about, most of these MAANG companies, they're going to ask you questions about data structures and algorithms, which is basically, in a nutshell, software engineering problems. So I have studied some of these concepts. Like, I'm familiar with, at the time I was familiar with the basics of big O complexity. I was familiar with a few data structures, but most of them I really wasn't aware of. Like, I could explain to you what the difference between an array and a linked list is, and I had some experience working with graph data structures. So anyways, during that 6-week process, a whole bunch of things happened, which meant that I was only able to prepare for about 3 weeks. So a little less than half the time I had allocated to prepare for that interview, just things were coming up, multiple different things, some things that have been in the news lately, and other personal things were going on. So going into that second interview, I knew I was going to be asked DSA questions, probably 2 of them, and I knew I needed to study really hard. The first 3 weeks was really difficult because there's some things in programming I'm really good at, and I'm generally quite a good problem solver if I can figure out the big picture of the problem. The thing that I'm really bad at, that I just doesn't really improve that much over time, is I'm really bad at remembering implementations. Find specific details of algorithms. So to give you a specific example, I can easily visualize and summarize what merge sort does in my head. I could draw you a picture of it. Where I will kind of screw up is I'll be like, okay, do I split it at middle -1 or middle -2? And just these little arithmetic things that are really specific, I just really don't remember them very well. It's just kind of a learning disability of mine. It's not something I can really improve much practicing it. I can do a lot of repetition to remember something specific, but that's basically it. Going into that interview, let me just move my chair so it's not squeaking so much. Going into that technical screen, I thought my chances of passing that were probably about 10%. I did manage to cover, in terms of data structures and algorithms, I covered stacks, I covered queues, I had some familiarity with graph data structures, but I didn't know breadth first search or depth first search. I've been working with arrays and array lists and stuff like that, so I had a reasonable amount of knowledge there, and I've been working with strings quite a bit. So luckily, because I had those basics covered, stack and queue, that ended up being really quite useful. And also I missed over one of the most important ones, hash map. There are certain problems that you can solve really easily using a hash map, and I find a hash map is very easy to work with. It's very intuitive for me. So I was pretty sure that I was going to get asked some really quite difficult questions, and this company gives you a bunch of practice questions, and in my opinion, the practice questions were slightly more difficult than the interview questions. So I didn't know that, and going into the interview, my expectations were really low. I didn't have as much time as I wanted to prepare, and like I say, I'm not naturally good at DSA stuff. Some parts of it I am, but most of it's just been a grind. A lot of hours, a lot of practice. Surprisingly to myself, I did really quite well in the technical screen. I was able to answer both questions. I was able to take direction from the person. The interviewer is actually really helpful. They would ask me like, hey, why, so you've got your hash map and you've got these 2 lists. What do you need those 2 lists for? And then I'm like, I don't know. Then thought about, oh, I see, I don't need them. I just need the hash map. Thank you. And I thanked the interviewer every time they kind of gave me a little hint. And I was able to answer all the questions, which honestly, I thought I had like not 0%, but like maybe 2% chance of answering both questions. So I did quite well. The interviewer even said at the end that he enjoyed the interview, which is a good sign. And about 7 days later, I heard back, and my Mac's going to sleep here. About 7 days later, I heard back, and they told me that they wanted me to do the final virtual on-site interview. So to give you a bit of idea how this works, it's basically 5 interviews total. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail for 2 reasons. Number 1, maybe I'll make a video about this later. And number 2, I did sign a non-disclosure agreement, so I particularly can't talk about too much in the way of specifics. There's a lot of things I could share, but anyways, in this case, so fast forward, it's about, I want to say, let me think about this here, January, February. It's about late February. This is March. Sorry, I'm terrible at months. So it's about late March, and I asked them if I could have about 4 weeks to prepare more. And then here we are. So it's, again, been a difficult process. My girlfriend and I live in Calgary, which is in Canada. She, because of her work, had to travel to Vancouver for basically a month, starting on March 12th. So I went with her. I've been living in a hotel since then, which is fine. It's a decent hotel, so I'm really not complaining. But I don't have my desktop computer. I don't have like my double monitor set up. It's just not really an ideal setup. Luckily, I have good quality internet, which is surprisingly rare in Canada. Anyways, that's the current situation. And since I've been here, I grew up on the West Coast in BC, so normally I would have been like visiting my friends and all that stuff, and I've done almost none of that. I've just been grinding on data structures and algorithms problems and studying like crazy. I'm not sure, it might be too bright, but I got some decent dark circles under my eyes. And that's basically where we are. Tomorrow is the interview, and I don't know how well I'm going to do. I'm not even really worrying or thinking, wasting time speculating on how well I'm going to do, because I was so way off the mark in the previous interview. However, if I was to go from that previous interview and think, oh yeah, I got this in the bag, no, I don't think that's a good idea either, because in the previous interview, they happened to have 2 questions which I could solve pretty quickly. I could see really quickly, okay, yeah, I see what the big deal is here. So there was a certain amount of luck, but luck because I had worked with hash maps and stacks were the 2, the main data structure for each question. Where I'm at now and what I studied, let me sort of summarize that. So I've studied priority queues or heaps, graph data structures in a lot more detail than before, greedy algorithms, which still can give me a bit of trouble. Greedy algorithms are really simple in principle. It's basically, the easy way to summarize it is, it's an algorithm which makes what is locally the best decision, but not necessarily temporally or globally the best decision. I'm not going to give you a whole lesson on it. There's lots of good videos on that. But some of the ones I ran into in the practice problems were definitely trickier than that. But you could kind of... I think where I'll have a bit of trouble is identifying when I need a greedy algorithm, because the 3 problems I went through, only one of them was very obviously solvable by that. Anyways, so yeah, greedy algorithms, memoization, so dynamic programming, which I haven't spent a lot of time on that, and they didn't even specify that exactly, but I know there's certain problems that can be best solved with memoization. The classic example is, solving a Fibonacci. I've been drilling really hard on my Big O complexity, doing a lot of questions regarding that. I definitely still have trouble with the really complicated ones, but I've cleared up a lot of the small mistakes that I was making in the past, like is it 2n or is it n plus m, for example. So yeah, I've been drilling really hard on those problems. If I was to try to quantify in terms of percentages my practice, it's probably been about 30% implementing things, so 30% building my own hash map, building my own stack data structure, building my own queue data structure, building like a graph, building trees. I've been doing a lot of work with trees as well, binary trees and n-ary trees, whatever. And another 30-ish% doing problems. Yeah, probably closer to like 40-ish%, so we've got 30% left. And about 30% watching videos, so this could be lectures, it could be just like tutorials. Not a lot of tutorials, because I find most tutorials suck, to be honest, most computing tutorials. I know I'm in the business, and maybe you think my videos suck, but a lot of people just really shouldn't be teaching programming, because they just regurgitate other people's information and use a bunch of jargon. Anyways, sorry, went on a bit of a rant there. Yeah, so that's mainly what my practice has been. I'm going to give one big tip which has really helped me. I find for me, when I come to a new problem, very often because I struggle with remembering implementations in languages, so I'll struggle maybe I want to use, for example, I code in Kotlin mostly, and I'll be doing that. Maybe I want to remove the first character from a string for some reason. Because I recently used the string.drop function in Kotlin, I remember it, but in a couple of days I would forget about the name of the function. I would remember that there is a function I could call that would remove the first character, but I'll forget that it's called count or whatever, or I'll forget the arguments. I always tend to forget these little details. One thing that really helps me, and it really helped me in the interview, is to write out the main steps of the algorithm or the entire algorithm in pseudocode, in a comment. I have my own sort of little pseudocode language that I developed over time, and it's partly inspired by Literate Programming by Donald Knuth. And I find for me, I start with an example and see if I can figure out how to sort of mentally manipulate the example into the answer. Then I'll write out pseudocode for the algorithm to solve the problem. Then I'll finally write the code. Now, when I was in the interview, I wasn't able to totally write out the whole kind of every step of the algorithm. I had to be a lot more abridged than that. But that's one of my biggest tips for me. Maybe you're someone who remembers implementation really well. You can just, jump into a problem and out of memory do it that way. But the reason why I was emphasizing that is I want to show the interviewer, hey, I might forget what this function is called, but I'm able to solve the problem pretty quickly. So hopefully that's more valuable to you than, was it splice, string.splice, or was it string.slice? Who cares? And in the context of these interviews, you're not going to have an IDE to help you with that. And that's something I lean on a lot, is autocomplete in my IDE to remember these things for me, or to be able to look up arguments really quickly using like Control Q or whatever. So anyways, that's kind of the preparations I've been doing. The last thing I'll talk about before I sign off is mentally, again, how I'm coming into this thing. In the past, I've tried a lot of different things for interviews. I used to get really kind of hyped up and almost like I was going into battle, as silly as that sounds, and kind of get my Celtic Viking blood going. This time around, I'm really just treating it like it's nothing special, even though on a certain level it is. I'm not thinking about, am I going to do well? I'm not thinking about, am I going to do poorly? I'm not dreaming about what'll happen if I get the job. If anything, I'm really just thinking about, okay, what am I going to do the day after the interview? What can I work on that's sort of back to normal? And the reason why I'm doing that is I find for me, especially at this stage in my life, the best mental sort of consistency or context that I can approach problems in is just a calm one. I never tended to get scared. I would get nervous, but by the time I would hit the interview, for some reason, my mind would just kind of snap in. And I have confidence that when I show up, if I've eaten correctly, I'm going to be in ketosis for the interview. if I've been meditating and if I've been exercising, I know I'm going to come into the interview and my mind's going to be where it needs to be, and I'm really not worried about it. I'm just trying to be here and now at the moment. So that's the story. And yeah, I might be posting in a week or 2 weeks or something like that saying I didn't get the job. It's okay. I still have a really great life and I have nothing to complain about. I might be posting in a week or two saying that I'm working at some big ass company. That's really cool too. It's just different paths, and I'm not attaching to one path really strongly or the other path, because I've been down that road many times, and it just leads to pain when you don't get what you want. So that's basically it. Hopefully some of that rambling was useful for you. For all the people wondering when I might be doing more live streams or stuff like that, I will definitely be doing that once I get back to Calgary. I would do it next Sunday, but my girlfriend and I are going to be driving for like 14 hours over next week, or not next weekend. So next weekend, I'll be visiting the island I grew up on, and then the weekend after that, I will be driving back to Calgary, which is like, I think, 1,100 kilometers. It's almost 1,000 miles anyways. So yeah, I'll be busy. But I will see if I can do something after the interview, like maybe not necessarily on the weekend, but I'll see what I can do. Anyways, that's basically it. Thank you for watching, cousins. I hope you're all doing okay. A lot of crazy stuff going on in the world, but the only thing we can do is worry about what's right in front of us and try to help each other as much as we can. Thanks for watching. Peace out.